2013 is back. At least that's what people are saying after recently learning that the internet's favorite couple, or at least the beauty community's favorite couple of 2013, Brett and Carly, have rekindled. Ever since they made that announcement, I feel like everyone's been very nostalgic for 2013, which is perfect timing because it is the next one in the Lore series. I've been going sequentially breaking down every single year. I've now done 2014 through 2020, but today we're diving into 2013, which I have to say, while prepping for this video, I just kept thinking, what a weird year. And like the word I kept coming back to actually was cringe. So many things from this year were super cringy. Not only the pop culture, but definitely the fashion. But overlooking so many of those cringy moments that we will get into, 2013 was also a very pivotal year in the way that we consume and interact with media. And it really set the stage for the modern day version of social media that we know and use today. So let's go back in time. Okay, the top song of the year of 2013 was Macklemore, Thrift Shop. And even though I wouldn't call that necessarily cringe, it definitely fits this idea of 2013 being like very quirky. Like the music video was super over the top, but you know what song was almost just as popular as that song in 2013? It was the song What Does the Fox Say? Okay, I wish I could include this song. I can't include any of these for copyright, but that's the song that was like, what does the fox say? One of the most popular songs, one of the most streamed YouTube videos. Like people thought that was the funniest thing in 2013. And just generally speaking, when I go back and do these lore videos, it's really amusing to see the way that our humor has evolved and look at things that we thought were really funny a decade ago that people wouldn't really find that funny today, but were like peak humor in 2013. It was also the year of the Harlem Shake. The entire like early 2010s were really popular with like the flash mob genre, and I would say the Harlem Shake is kind of a version of a flash mob. If you don't remember this dance, it would start out with a room full of people and one person would be dancing for a few seconds and then the rest of the group would join in, and it was to this specific song. And it was funny going back and watching these because there wasn't really like a specific choreography to it. It was very easy to do. Like you were just kind of wiggling around and then the entire room would start wiggling around. And I remember this especially being really big at schools. Like it's not even schools, like everyone was doing a Harlem Shake. Your office, your school, your sports team, your everything, everyone was doing the Harlem Shake. And I also think this kind of speaks to what trends existed as in 2013 compared to today, because now things are a lot more niche. Like we all live on different pockets of the internet. We're not necessarily consuming the same things. Like I might reference something that I see on TikTok to a friend and I've seen it all over on my algorithm and it feels like everyone's paying attention to this, but then I mention it to my friend and they have no idea, and then they mention this other topic that I didn't know what was going on, because we're all living in very like secluded corners of the internet. And while there are trends that reach a mass audience, we don't experience things collectively the same way we did over a decade ago. The very sophisticated personalized algorithms of 2025 have kind of niched down the corners of the internet that we live in. But in 2013, the Harlem Shake was everywhere. Also very popular this year was Miley Cyrus' Wrecking Ball. That music video I remember being extremely controversial. Also was the year of Kid President. Do you remember this?
The world needs to stop being boring. It's like that dude Journey said, don't stop believing unless your dream is stupid. Then you should get a better dream. Will Michael Jordan have quit? Well, he did quit. No, he retired. Yeah, he retired. But before that, in high school, what if he quit when he didn't make the team? He would have never made Space Jam. And I love Space Jam.
He didn't like start posting in 2013, but he was huge in 2013. That was one of his most popular videos. He had very like inspirational content. The first Frozen came out in 2013. And also speaking of Frozen, 2013 was like the peak era of frozen yogurt. And I know this to be true because I worked at a frozen yogurt shop in 2013. And prepping for this video has actually had me so nostalgic for frozen yogurt because I feel like, I don't want to say it's not a thing anymore because it absolutely still is, but it's not as popular as it was over a decade ago. Like a lot of the original frozen yogurt shops have closed down. Like I was even Googling like frozen yogurt near me. I live in New York City. That should be very easy to find, but there really aren't that many anymore. Okay, but peak cringiness from 2013 was really in the fashion. I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, was this the worst era for fashion. And I can't decide if either A, yes, that's the case and it was, or B, we're just too close to it for me to see it as it was. Like, it was too recent for me to have fond memories of it, because I think of like actual Y2K, early 2000s fashion, and I love it. Like, oh my gosh, that's so my style. I loved that era. And I often question if I love it because it was far enough away ago for me to fall back in love with it. And maybe that will also happen for early 2010s fashion. But I have to say right now, I look at these and I think, what were we wearing? There were just some terrible trends. Okay, galaxy print leggings, festival inspired looks just for everyday wear, lots of statement necklaces with the baubles very big and prominent, high-low skirts. It was also a time of like twee, which I think was a great trend from this era. I really did love twee. Same with like soft grunge. Like, there were definitely some cute aesthetics born in this time, but overall, when I look at the really prominent trends, like, oh my gosh, the owl necklace, like there's so many things I'm like, why was I wearing that? A lot of those debatably could have been a few years earlier, but we were definitely still seeing people wear those in 2013. I will say though, there are plenty of looks from the early 2010s that have already come back into style. A huge one is the peplum silhouette. It's definitely worn in a different way today than we were wearing it in the early 2010s, but that's a really prominent trend currently that's very much recycled from that era. I know there's also been kind of this push to bring back the bandage dress. I wouldn't say it's fully back, but there's definitely a push for it. In makeup though, I really did like this era. It was just before the like Instagram full glam era, but there were still elements of that more glammed up look. We were starting to learn to contour. We were wearing a lot of bold lips. Like, this was a time where bold lips were everything, whether that was a deep burgundy, a purple, a blue, like we were happy to play with lip color. I will just say, generally speaking, winged liner has been a really prominent trend for at least the last 15 years. Like, as makeup trends come and go, one that has really defined this point in time has been the winged eyeliner. It has definitely evolved. The earlier days around 2013 and even prior, it was very much that dramatic, sharp cat eye, which later evolved into a similar look with a bold lash, which later kind of started to come back down with a similar look, but maybe with brown eyeliner. And then we were seeing people swap that out for a shadow wing and like a softer wing. Finally seeing the wings start to fade away a little bit. People are definitely still holding on to it, but I think it defines this era so much so, to the point that sometimes I'll see people do recreations of makeup looks from different decades and they still always add a wing to it. Even if it was a decade that the wing was really not worn, we're gonna add a wing to it. We just cannot let go of the wing. But also in beauty, 2013 was the year that Juvederm was approved for cheek augmentation. So if you're not familiar, Juvederm is a filler. Now, to be fair, other types of filler and injectables predate this by a long time. And Juvederm also was not the first hyaluronic acid filter, but it was one of the first. But I wanted to include this because it really speaks to the increased accessibility of filler. And as we know, we really entered a filler era a few years after this. That was made possible by this approval that happened in 2013. And I really wanted to include this to remind us how recent it is that we've seen this injectable boom. Even Botox was only approved for cosmetic use in 2002. And while that was 23 years ago, it's still not that long ago. It is a relatively new phenomenon to see people, especially people outside of like Hollywood and celebrities, altering their face, especially at the capacity that we see in 2025. And again, this approval in 2013 and even in surrounding years when other similar treatments were also approved by the FDA really set the stage for the normalization of injectables and just general aesthetic work now in the 2020s. Okay, but 2013 changed the way that we use media. And I really wanted to include this because while this video is spoken through a beauty lens, the way that we interact with beauty content is of course shaped by the way that we use social media and just consume and interact with media in general. And so much of that changed in 2013. And that came through the advancement of technology. So I really want to point out 4G here and the impact that it has had on social media and the way that it set the stage for the modern day version of social media that we use today. So 4G was the new generation of mobile network technology. Before that, we had 3G, now we're on to 5G. And it's kind of difficult to share a timeline of like 3G, 4G, 5G, because these get introduced around the world at different times. But what 4G did was made browsing the internet faster and easier. So to really set the stage of 2013, I have to remind you that the web was accessed more frequently from a desktop device than a mobile device. But late 2012 was when Apple introduced their first 4G phone. Now, Apple was not the first to do this, and also, obviously not everyone uses an Apple device, but I think that timeline of late 2012 is relevant because it speaks to the time frame where people were starting to make that transition to 4G. Again, it's hard to really pin down a window because this took place over the course of a few years, but that was all happening during this time frame. And 4G had considerably faster downloading speeds than its 3G predecessor, which not only made browsing faster, but also gave us way more capabilities with our phones, allowing social media to evolve into the beast that we know it as today. And it was funny too, going back and reading a lot of these articles, to see phones referenced as a smartphone. And yeah, technically today, an iPhone is still a smartphone, but you rarely hear that description of a smartphone. People just say a phone. And not to really date myself, but I remember having a flip phone, like a little pink one, way back in the day, my first phone, which I will say also, even to date myself, it was when I was like maybe a junior or senior in high school when I got my first phone, and it wasn't that common. I would say like half of my school had a phone, half of them didn't. And it was really just like for emergencies. I could text with T9, but like again, it's a flip phone. And where I'm going with this is I remember like you could access the internet from the phone, like you could go to a web browser and like type something in, but the capabilities were minimal. You couldn't do much. And trying to load something took an eternity. And what 4G and then subsequently 5G allowed us to do is do these tasks faster with less or zero lag time, which made things like watching videos on our phone a possibility, which, okay, that was my segue into Vine. Oh my gosh, we have to talk about the very short-lived app Vine. So it was technically created in 2012, but it didn't launch until 2013. And it was quickly purchased by Twitter, back when it was called Twitter and not X. And Vine was kind of like TikTok before TikTok. It was a video sharing platform, and the videos were very short in the beginning, like 6 seconds. But you could film it all in the app. It was very simple. You just held down and it recorded, and then when you picked your finger up, it stopped recording. It made it really simple for the average person to just make a video. And this blew up so quickly. And what was really nice and kind of endearing about Vine, that was also the case on YouTube at the time, is that a lot of the videos felt very homemade. They were so different than a TikTok video you might see today. And even though the two apps are similar in concept, the content from 2013 Vine compared to 2025 TikTok, night and day. And at the time, these Vine viewers really appreciated this like approachable, organic, homemade feel and vibe on the app. Through this, we started seeing Vine influencers emerge. And what Instagram did in 2013 was what Instagram always does, is to copy another app that's doing well. So 2013 was the year that Instagram added the video function. Now, over the years, Instagram tried out a few different versions of video on their platform. There was IGTV for a while. Do you remember that? Now it's Reels. Like, they've played around with different concepts over the years, but 2013, they did this to kind of capitalize on what Vine was doing. So 2013 was also the year that Instagram added DMs. I wanted to include this because I think we really underplay how much DMs change the way that we communicate. And hear me out. Through this function, you can communicate with just about anyone around the world. Okay, now obviously there are limitations. Not everyone is on Instagram. Not everyone's DMs are open. Not everyone will respond to your DM. But for the first time ever, it was truly accessible to reach out to almost anyone. And yes, other platforms had similar messaging and like a similar function prior to Instagram introducing the DM. But what made Instagram different was the way that the platform is set up. You know, think about Facebook. You have to be friends with someone to DM them. I guess you could technically DM someone you're not friends with, but Instagram was one of the first apps to introduce this idea of like following. Like, you didn't have to be mutual friends with someone, you could follow them and they didn't have to follow you back and vice versa. So you could DM someone that you don't actually know, you aren't actually friends with. Like, all you need to know is someone's name to then probably be able to find their Instagram account and then send them a DM. Prior to this, you needed someone's phone number to be able to reach out to them. There was a lot more intimacy involved in being able to contact someone. But now really you could reach out to just about anyone. Again, they might not respond, but you have the capability. And when I think about 2025 and the advancements we've made in technology, I think a general theme is that most things are just easier. I know when I say that, it's like, no, so many things about our life today are very hard compared to previous decades, and I don't dismiss that, but a lot of day-to-day functions have been made considerably easier through the advancement of technology. So when I was sick, which I'm still a little congested, you might be able to hear it, but if you remember my last video, I said I was getting over a cold, and when I was super sick and like trapped in my house, I started rewatching Friends. And Friends, of course, season 1 came out in the 90s, and there were so many things on that show that just reminded me how much our technology has evolved. For example, in one episode, Phoebe comes running into Monica's apartment and she's like, I need to see your atlas. I just met this guy. He lives in a country I haven't heard of. I need to look it up on the map. And it was such a jarring moment to watch because I can't imagine a time where I could not just pick up my phone and look something up on a map in 1 second and know exactly where my destination was. It's just a funny thought to think about, but okay, what else was happening online in this time? Well, it was the Tumblr era. Okay, Tumblr. Wow. So what was interesting was that I went on to Google search trends and they had a wrap up of the most searched everything basically of 2013. And for social media sites, I was actually kind of surprised to see that the #1 searched social media site was Tumblr. Number 2 was Facebook, 3 was LinkedIn, 4 was SoundCloud, and 5 was Google+. So first of all, Instagram was not even on this list. But the Tumblr era could be a time of its own. Tumblr is an interesting platform, kind of combining elements of a lot of different platforms, but it had a very like blog adjacent feel. And we talked quite a bit about blogs in the 2014 video, even though like really the blogging era definitely was at its peak in 2013 and even earlier than that. But one thing about Tumblr that has kind of sustained popularity into today is the creation of cores, so I will call them. I feel like there were very differentiated segments of Tumblr where certain looks or songs or just general vibes were popular, and I feel like that has transitioned into the like 2020s version of cores that we know of today that maybe were a little more popular 5 years ago, but that feels like something holding on from the Tumblr era of this time. But this really influenced the way that people dress, do their makeup, the music that they listen to. It was also really the peak of BuzzFeed. I feel like so many people associate BuzzFeed with this time in the early 2010s. It's very much like millennial coded. Like I'll tell you what, I loved a BuzzFeed quiz. What character are you from this? What blank are you? Now that it obviously still exists today, but its heyday, its peak, the peak of popularity of BuzzFeed was definitely in this era. Okay, but let's talk about YouTube. So the quote unquote beauty community, as it's often described, I would say wasn't quite established in 2013. There were definitely really prominent beauty creators posting on the platform and getting a ton of views. But I would say that like quote unquote beauty community that we often describe and think of emerged a few years later. At this time, beauty content was really spread out across a lot of different platforms. A lot of it was still happening on blogs, like I said, maybe on Tumblr also, but also in just like online chat rooms in general, things like Makeup Alley. I remember using that to access a lot of makeup reviews. Honestly, like prior to 2013, but I will just say generally speaking, like people were finding beauty content from a lot of different places. But one general theme I noticed when looking back at 2013 makeup videos was that they were very technique focused. And that's a huge way that they differ from modern day makeup tutorials. Modern day, that sounds so dramatic to compare and call it today modern day versus 2013. But compared to current makeup tutorials that are a lot more product focused, you know, a lot of makeup content today is review focused. We're talking about products, we're comparing products. That really wasn't the case in 2013. Even when you would watch tutorials, people might tell you the products they're using, but they also might just say, and then I'm going to put a brown eyeshadow in the crease, and you were just kind of expected to use whatever brown eyeshadow you have. I feel like it's actually a very current phenomenon that we feel the need to use the exact same products as the person in the tutorial, when in reality, like, you can achieve a similar look very likely with stuff that you already have. But at the time, content really wasn't product focused. It was very tutorial focused, and I will say just a general theme was DIY videos, even outside of beauty. Like, I remember going back, I was looking at a lot of videos from Andrea's Choice. One of her most popular videos from this time was how to make a beanie. I feel like people really just wanted to learn how to do things themselves, because this was one of the first times that we had access to a platform like YouTube to teach us how to do things ourselves. Again, obviously YouTube wasn't invented in 2013, and there were other ways to learn how to do things prior to this, but it was a new phenomenon to have as much access as we did. I was also laughing watching back a lot of these early videos because they would start off with so much posing, which was still a thing like years down the road, but especially in 2013, it was like 30 seconds of posing. Like, the intros were very long. The videos did not start for a solid like 30 seconds, which really contrasts today. Like, you got to get right into the video or the viewer kind of loses interest. But at the time, like, we were locked in. I could watch like a minute of someone posing and just be like so excited before the makeup tutorial started. Like, it felt glamorous and fun. And another really big content theme I was noticing from 2013 was transforming into a celebrity. And I referenced this in one of the other lore videos, but especially in 2013, so many of the top videos were like turning myself into Demi Lovato, turning myself into Ariana Grande. And there were a couple years there where this like before and after transformation of specifically making yourself into another celebrity dominated. Like, these videos had multi-million views. And it's funny because today I don't think that video would be that interesting. Like, I think it would still get views, but people were much more interested in that type of content in 2013. Okay, but what came out that year? I want to start, before we talk products, I want to talk about Deciem. So Deciem, as we know, later went on to launch The Ordinary, but Deciem was created in 2013. And I wanted to include this one because even though The Ordinary came later and their popularity really exploded later, the model for that brand really influenced the way that we consume skincare in 2025. And what The Ordinary did really differently was make their products about the ingredients, but in a very uncomplicated way. It would be like a standout ingredient. Like, this is the azelaic acid serum. This is the glycolic acid serum. They simplified skincare. They made it really affordable. And later down the road, we saw other skincare brands try to copy this model. You know, I think of like Good Molecules, even Bioma, lots of similar like mass skincare brands followed this model of The Ordinary. But okay, where I'm going with this, the reason that I include it, their products centered around the ingredients. And prior to this point, there wasn't much knowledge from the consumer about skincare ingredients, what they did, and how they worked. But again, going back to the advancements we saw in technology and with just the growth of the internet and how easy it is to research and learn more about something, whether that's a YouTube video from a creator, Googling something and falling down a rabbit hole in that way, consumers were starting to learn more about how their products worked, and they were starting to become more educated on ingredients in skincare. It used to be more common for a skincare product's name to fit what it did. It would say the hydrating serum when it was actually a hyaluronic acid serum, or it might say the wrinkle reduction serum when it was actually a retinol serum. But over the years, as consumers have gotten more educated on ingredients, how they work, what they're doing for their skin, we're now seeing products that really call out ingredients in a way that we didn't see as often over a decade ago. And this could be an entirely separate video. I think there are a lot of influences here, but I wanted to include this because I think it ties in with this timeline of more information being accessible to the consumer and therefore consumers becoming more savvy about the products that they purchase. But okay, what came out in 2013 products-wise? Okay, the Naked 3 palette, the third version of the viral Naked palette. I will say these first couple years of the 2010s, the Naked palette was everything. It really dominated. Urban Decay really was like at their peak at this time. This was a year after they were acquired by L'Oreal. People loved those dang Naked palettes. I loved them. I was a Naked 2 girl. The Naked 3 was less loved than the other two. The Naked 1 was definitely like cult classic, internet internet's favorite. People also really liked Naked 2, and then Naked 3, people were like, okay, it's not as good. And then I feel like the subsequent Naked palettes people didn't really care about, but the first 3 really were like the core palettes, even if the interest started to dwindle. It was also the year that NARS launched their Radiant Creamy Concealer. That's so funny because that one's still today super popular product. Same with the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Powders. Those came out in 2013. I really enjoy those for like a softer look. I feel like they've inspired a lot of other beauty brands to do that kind of glowy baked powder. IT Cosmetics launched their CC cream in 2013. I actually would have imagined this one to be older, but this was a time that BB creams and CC creams were very popular. This was some of the early stages of like a very K-beauty influence on a Western consumer, and we were seeing beauty brands try to replicate different styles of product. That one still today, I feel like the IT Cosmetics CC cream, even in 2025, is a super popular product. It was also the year of the Rimmel Stay Matte Mousse Foundation. That was a really popular one at the drugstore. And I did also look back at the 2013 Allure Reader's Choice Awards. So I did this in the 2014 video because something I found from that year, much like 2013, was that we had way less beauty product launches and people were using and loving their products for longer. So in that 2014 video, I wanted to explore the 2014 Reader's Choice Awards from Allure to talk about what we were really using that year, even if it didn't come out in 2014. And I went to look at the 2013 version as well, and I was so confused because I'm scrolling through and I'm like, these are all the same products from the 2014 list. Did I get the 2014 list wrong and I was actually looking at 2013? No, the two lists are just so similar. What people were using in 2014 was the same as 2013. Like this whole chunk of a couple years, like we were holding onto our products, loving them, using them longer. We didn't consume makeup the same way that people do in 2025. The trend cycle was slower and the products people were loving were popular way longer than they are today. But again, as we talked about earlier in the video, 2013 really set the stage for that to change. The foundation for social media as we know it today really began being laid around this year, and the entire beauty landscape really evolved because of so many of the changes that started in 2013. So I hope you're still enjoying this series. If you've missed anything so far, I will have the playlist linked right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will go ahead and see you on my next one. Bye.